So today I am talking about the very long journey that led me to becoming the owner of an aeroplane. It was an unbelievably long journey that took me from the day I decided I wanted to try and buy my own plane to actually ending up owning this plane. And the story of how I ended up with this particular plane is as remarkable as the Odyssey and the 7 other airplanes that I flew, I think, with a view to buying them before I finally ended up becoming the owner of this plane. It was the most ridiculous long shot, but I'm someone that doesn't know how to give up. I'll just keep on going. I'll just keep on pushing until I find a way. And to be honest, if I hadn't been relentless in my pursuit of owning an aircraft, there's no chance I'd have ever ended up owning any plane, probably at all, let alone this one. The purpose of this video is to try to give hope to people who thought they would never ever own an airplane. Okay, if you're a private pilot and you're renting club aircraft, or you're a member of a shared aircraft group and you're dreaming of owning your own plane because you're feeling held back, that's the position I was in for years, and I couldn't see a way through. Where there's a will, there's a way. I'm a firm believer that where there's a will, there's a way, and if you want it bad enough, you'll find a way. Without any guarantees of ending up actually owning one, I thought to myself, well, I'm just going to enjoy the process of trying to find one. And I learnt so many lessons along the way. I learnt the lesson about buying an airplane for the wrong mission, or nearly. I mean, thank goodness I didn't. So the missions, I learnt all about the aircraft themselves, because up until then I hadn't taken as much interest and I hadn't paid as much attention to the specifics of individual aircraft, their engines, their props, their total time, their airframe, all the bits and bobs you have to get to know about. I learnt to fly in a 2-seater motorised glider called a Venture Falk at Enstone Airfield. It was a tail dragger, and I'm so glad I learnt in that very lightweight, very slow plane. I learnt all kinds of additional skills in handling an aircraft in crosswinds and gusty days, thanks to that plane. Once I got my PPL, I managed to find a share that I could afford for 1,700 quid in a Piper Cherokee 140, a very old, very underpowered but well maintained Cherokee 140, which lived at White Waltham, an old World War II grass airstrip just outside London. And that became the plane I flew for quite a long time. And I had a lot of my beginners near misses in that plane, which I'll do a video on another day. Near misses as in things going wrong that could have gone very badly wrong, but I got away with, which is just due to inexperience. After the Piper Cherokee, Golf Alpha Tango Oscar Kilo. It was a great plane to build some hours in, but then when I found myself moving to Devon in 2012, I found a Cessna 172 share here at Dunkeswell, which I bought into, and that cost me £3,600. There were 10 of us in that plane. Golf Bravo Hotel Uniform Golf, great big hug as we used to call it. Lovely plane, really nice late 70s plane, which I did my instrument rating, my IMC rating and training in, and I flew that plane to Enniskillen, Northern Ireland, solo IMC on my maiden IMC voyage. It was much too big a journey, but it was okay. I got there and I got back. My intended use of aircraft definitely outgrew what the aircraft ownership group wanted. So when I came out of that group, I was living in Devon. There were flying school aircraft that were rentable, Cessna 152s and 172s, but I wanted to get into more powerful. At the time, I wanted to get into a seaplane. I wanted to get into a 6-seater seaplane. I wanted to get into a Cessna 206. And I didn't know how to go about doing that. I had no clue how to go about doing that. And I thought that the plane I needed was an amphibious Cessna 206 on amphibious floats. And I found some. And I went and I flew them. I flew one. The other one wasn't flyable. But while I was waiting, I joined Blackbush Flying Group at Blackbush Airport, which had a whole range of planes. Well, 150s, 172s, 182s, and even some twins that I didn't fly. But I did get my retractable rating in a Piper Arrow in that group. And I got really comfortable flying. They had 2 182s in that group. And I spent most of my time flying that 182, just trying to build time in a propeller, in an aircraft with a constant speed prop, a bit more power, and just get used to that plane. And I did, and I flew it a lot. Me and this plane here have history. Me and this plane have been in icing conditions at 12,000 feet over the Pyrenees. I don't know what it's doing here at Dunkeswell, but it's here at Dunkeswell. It used to be part of Blackbush Flying Group. and I spent a lot of time. This is where I got most of my 182 experience before I got dusty. It's a 182Q, a Cessna 182Q with a 3-blade prop, and I took that plane to Lisbon and back in full instrument conditions with an instructor who came along as a friend. We had proper icing. Windscreen iced up, leading edge of the plane iced up. And while I was in that group flying that plane and other planes, I flew the 150s, 172s. It was a fantastic group to be part of. There was always something available to fly. It was really great. But longer away trips were still not really possible because they're shared aircraft and they didn't want them going away for long stretches of time. So in this video, I'm going to go through one at a time all of the planes that I went to see. And what you'll see is there's such a variety of aircraft that it was clear I didn't really know what my mission was. And it was also clear that my finance options that I thought were there, then they weren't there, then they were there again, also influenced what I thought I could buy. But what a motley array of aircraft I ended up seeing and flying. Some fantastic ones and some not so great ones. The first plane I ever... Oh my God. This was so over-ambitious for my first plane to ever go and look at to buy. It was a beautiful Cessna 206, U-206 on amphibious floats in Switzerland that was just in the most immaculate condition. And I wanted to do a pre-buy, so I actually flew out there and I got an engineer from Blackbush to fly out with me to come and inspect this plane thoroughly. It was quite a lot of money, but at the time I had finance in place that I could have used to buy it. But when I got there, sadly, what I discovered was that a previous buyer had bought the plane, taken off on the amphibious floats, and gone and landed in the Mediterranean, and had such a bad landing that they hit so hard they went around, but they wrinkled the floats badly, they damaged the float struts, but they managed to get the plane back to its land base in Switzerland, and it went back in the hangar. It was put on wheels. So when I saw it, it was on wheels. But it was such a beautiful plane. It had oxygen system inside, so it'd be great for high altitude cruising. It was a really special aeroplane that I would have loved to have owned, but it was too soon for me. It was the wrong time financially for me as well, so it was meant to be. But the fact that I took that engineer out there with me to look at that plane and do a pre-buy inspection on it would actually help me later on when it came to buying this plane. And if the only thing that came from that wasted trip to Switzerland looking at that plane was that I ended up with this plane, then that trip was worth it. So that was plane number one. So that was September 2017 that I did that trip to go and see that plane. The next one was January 2018. So this was a Cessna 210F. It was just a land plane only, not a seaplane this time. But I was looking for a 6-seater at the time for a number of reasons. I know I only needed 4 seats, but I've got extended family with other kids, and I had plans to fly lots of them around. And that's why I was looking for a 6-seater. And the thing I remember most about flying that plane, and I did fly it, I flew in P2. It was my first time flying P2 actually. Was that the plane got ahead of me, and I realised how I wasn't yet comfortable flying complex aircraft. It was fast, it was powerful compared to what I was used to, and I felt a little bit overwhelmed flying it. I felt a bit intimidated flying it, but it was still a great experience. I actually ended up doing a night landing in that plane in Switzerland, I remember, in the mountains. It was awesome. Had a very experienced ferry pilot with me, giving me the test flight in it. We're now in August 2018, and this time I found a Cessna 206 seaplane on amphibious floats that I could fly, and I did fly. I went to Stockholm, which has, I think, 25,000 islands within 50-mile radius, and this plane was just great to fly. I mean, it had had a very hard life in salt water. It had been well maintained, but you could still see it was tired. It hadn't been loved, I felt. It kind of been maintained as required, but without love, because the owner of it actually owned a few aircraft. He had 2 amphibious 206s. The other one was one he loved, clearly, and this was the one he wanted to let go. But I got to fly with him and spend a couple of days with him, actually. And I was tempted because it was within my grasp to have bought that plane. But it's incredibly lucky that I didn't, for reasons I'll go into another time. And even though I wanted an amphibious Cessna 206 on floats, which that was, and it was for sale, and it was within my budget as I imagined it at the time, it would have been a big mistake to buy that plane. And I think I went with my gut feel. My gut feel said, no, this is not the right plane to buy, and I'm really glad I did, because look how much short grass strip flying I do now. I wouldn't be able to do that in an amphibious Cessna 206. No chance. Would have been the wrong plane for my mission. To have a look at the avionics, it needs upgrading. It's the first time I've seen a Cessna that only has left or right, and you can't fly on both. And you don't get green lights in an amphibious seaplane for gear. You get gear down is amber and gear up is blue. The thing it doesn't have, which I would need if I was going to buy it, is an autopilot. It's only got one VOR and glide slope, but this is an old plane, 6 seats. Still looking for a Cessna 206 at this point. I found a storm damaged one in Malta, and I went to the airport to see it. And it was being sold, and it was being sold cheap, but it was too big a rebuild project. It would have been several years if I had lots of time, which I didn't. So obviously didn't get to fly that one. But it was a shame, because that seemed to be a good straight plane that had just been flipped upside down in a storm. Damaged wing, damaged prop strike, etc. And it was in pieces. So this is the undamaged wing of this plane, the left wing. This is the damaged wing. Now those red tags are showing where there's a slight buckling in the skin of the wing from where the right wing tip impacted the ground in this storm. So that's the damage from impacting the ground. That's the fuel fillets in use, and there's this one that's not in use. That just turns freely, it doesn't open. And this is the route of this one. A month later, I found myself in Maine in September 2018 when I went out for the Greenville fly-in, and there was a beautiful Cessna 182 for sale out there. I can't remember exactly which model it was, but I flew it, and it was lovely. But there were complications about buying a plane from America, getting to the UK, and it didn't work out, so I didn't buy that one. We're now in January 2019, a few months later. I found the most incredible Cessna 210, but it was such a well-loved, well-maintained aircraft, and it had every conceivable extra on it that you'd want. It had cool little air brakes. It had, I can't remember the name of it, but one of those, if you have a power loss in the aircraft, for backup power, a little dynamo that drops down out of the wing and spins a propeller and provides power, had that as well. It was beautiful. It was a lovely plane, and I wanted to buy that plane. I wanted to buy that retractable Cessna 210 with all the extra gadgets on it. It was beautiful inside and out. I flew it. I loved it. And I had finance lined up for it, but the finance company I went to said they wouldn't finance an NREG aircraft, which meant it was out of my budget, sadly. As it turns out, am I glad I didn't buy that plane? Yes, because the mission that I found myself in the last 2 years with this plane wouldn't have suited a 210. So now, having had problems with getting finance on an aircraft, I started lowering my sights, and the next aircraft I flew was based at Bournemouth, and it was a Cessna 177RG, a retractable Cessna 177. It's a bit of a Marmite aircraft, the 177. Lots of people either love them or hate them, but I can see why it's an interesting aircraft. 4-cylinder, same engine as in a 172, but much higher cruise speed because it's a much slipperier aerodynamic design and retractable undercarriage. I flew it. Lovely original red interior. Something didn't feel right about the sale, the people selling it. I don't know. It just smelt fishy. I walked away. It would have been a cheap airplane, but again, that was one of the reasons why I was like, this doesn't feel quite right. Didn't feel like it had been loved. This next plane, I flew. It was a Cessna 182. It was based at White Waltham, and it was the first Cessna 182 I'd found in the UK that was within my budget. It was just outside, but I thought I could stretch to it. I flew it. I liked it. It needed a lot of work. It was quite tatty in many ways, but it was a solid aircraft and it flew nicely. And then something happened which I'm not very proud of, but it was just unavoidable. I shook hands on a deal to buy that aircraft, but I told the sellers that I was going to need about 6 weeks to get the money together, which I was. That I had to just do various things to get the finance together. I had to sell a couple of things. And I hadn't been expecting to find an aircraft like that. And I was going to be buying it outright, no finance. And that's why I had to take a while to get the finances together. And we've shaken hands, and it was during the course of that period. Oh, that's right. I forgot what happened. I took that 182 to my favourite aircraft engineer at Blackbush to do a pre-buy inspection on it. The owners had had it for 20 years. They were well known. There were a couple of British Airways pilots who, and also one was an instructor, I think. While he was looking over that aircraft, he said to me, "It's okay, but I know of a better one." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, I've got a friend of mine. I've been looking after his aircraft. I've known him for a long time. He's owned it for about 5 years. He hasn't flown it very much. He lives in Wales. Let me give him a call." And the next day he rang me. He said, "Yeah, I've rung the chap up and he would be willing to sell his aircraft." And it was this one. And this is known as one of the, despite the slightly tatty interior, because it's original, so it's 40-something years old, this is known as one of the best 182s in the country. And he said, if you want to go and see him and do it quickly, yeah, he'd be interested. So, and I dropped everything. I found some photographs online of this plane. I found out that it had, and he said, "Oh, it's got those weird canards on the front of it." I'm not really sure about the canards, but they've got canards on it. So it's on the end reg. I can remember cancelling stuff, and the next day I drove to Haverfordwest, met the owner of this plane, went for a flight in it. And you know when you just walk, it's the same when you walk into a property, the first time you walk into a property, you get that feeling, you just know that's your new home. Or a car, like with Sylvester, the Mercedes. When I found that, I've been looking for a Mercedes for years. And when I found that one, it was sitting in the back of a hangar, and I got in, sat down, it hadn't been run for 2 years, and I just said to Anne-Marie, "This is our next car." You just knew, and I knew when I saw this plane, and when I got in it, I knew it was my next plane, but I had to back out of the other deal. They were incredibly gracious about it. They went on to sell it for a much higher price to someone else, actually, so I didn't feel too bad about it. The owner of this plane had been a lifelong PPL holder. He's a radio engineer, and he'd had this plane for 5 or 6 years, and it lived in a hangar, but he hadn't flown it very much for a number of life reasons. And I knew the engineer who'd been looking after it as someone I trusted, so I didn't need to do a pre-buy on it. And we agreed a price that was, he said he didn't have the time, the inclination, the energy to advertise the plane and go through the rigmarole of selling a plane on the open market. He said he lived in a remote place in Wales and just didn't want to go through the hassle. So for that reason, he was willing to sell it to me at a really, really good price. But it was also sort of sight unseen, and I also knew, he said that there's a few things he's doing on it, but we flew it, and it flew beautifully, and you just get that gut feel, don't you, about certain machines, that this is a straight, honest, true, good machine. And I said, look, it's more money, it's outside my budget, but I will find a way. And the story about how I actually found a way to find the money for this plane is actually a story for another video. But it took me 2 months. And in December 2019, Amory and the kids drove me up to Haverfordwest. And what I can tell you is, once I transferred the money by backs from my bank account into his, I had 100 quid left to my name at that point. I had more money coming in at the end of the month, but at that particular point, I'd even had to borrow a couple of thousand quid from a close mate just to make up the last. I'd sold stuff, gone down the back of the sofa. I sold a watch that I got for my 21st birthday that I got 1,000 quid for. I'd just gone everywhere to try and get the money to buy this plane, and I'm glad I did. It's now worth, so I'm told, more than double what I paid for it. So it was a very good investment. But I will tell how I afforded this plane is a story worth telling, but I'll do that in another video. So thank you for watching this video. That's the story of how I ended up buying my first plane. And let me finish by saying this. It's been more of a life-changing experience than I could have imagined in many ways. And anyone watching this video who wants to get into their own private aircraft, if you do 50 hours a year or more, it'll open up an entire new world of aviation adventures and family adventures to you, family, friends, whoever. And it was such a long road getting into this plane, but it was worth it. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye-bye.